Привет, tovarishchi! Today is Victory Day, and I figured what better way to mark the occasion than by looking over, shall we say, one of the worst films regarding the Second World War, I dare say, ever created. And indeed, as well, one of the most disturbing films, although perhaps not along the lines that you may initially imagine. That film being The Fall of Berlin, a Soviet film made in 1950. Not that long after the war, still within very recent memory for pretty much the entirety of the population, and still very much in the Stalinist era. And ergo, I'm sure you can imagine just why the film is as disturbing as it is. But I think that's the sort of thing that we can talk about when we're actually watching. So, without further ado, let us begin. I do hope, once again, that you will forgive me having to, well, remove the helmet and the pilotka. It's rather difficult to put a headset on over top of both of those things. Let's see here. Oh, there we are. We can make it, well, there. We'll make it still nice and dramatic. We can put him over Cuthbertson there. And as always, I'm afraid I do have to put on my eyes there. Again, not the best look, but oh well. Let's begin, shall we? Now, the scene that we're actually going to start at here is the one right before that which I'd really like to talk about when it gets really ridiculous and outrageous in so many ways. But I want to show you the scene that comes before it, just to really set the scene as far as, you know, what the movie could have been, maybe what to expect, and the overall tone that it is trying to set. So without further ado, let us begin The Fall of Berlin, and we can begin, as you can see there, with the burning of the Reichstag. Soldiers fighting their way up the staircase, the red banner in hand, attempting to raise it above the city to proclaim that final victory. Now, you'll notice, obviously, some of the fighting scenes here, they're rather hokey, you know, they're kind of silly like that, you know, that's pretty silly to look at. But you have to understand, of course, it's a film made in 1950. We can't really blame them for that. You know, we can't expect them to have the same cinematography and effects and acting and whatnot that we have nowadays with all the little, you know, tricks we've learned over the years. But overall, it's still very worthwhile to watch this scene because of the sentiment that's being portrayed. Look right here. A man moving up to the top of the building to hoist aloft a banner which even seems to be colored red with his own blood. and he dies as a result. You know, he's shot down. At the last possible moment of the war, he is killed. And he's being held in the arms of his comrade who is saying to him, "Look, Yusuf, the city is ours. We've won Berlin. We have victory." And yet he's overcome with grief, of course, that his friend has now died at the last possible moments of the war. He was so close to making it, and here's still another victim of the tragedy that is war. It's a hokey scene, but it's a dramatic scene. It's a sorrowful scene, and it's the sort of thing you may imagine that many soldiers would have experienced. And not obviously like this, but in principle, it's the sort of thing that many men returning home from war would relate to on a very, you know, deep level. And of course, the symbolism here, oh dear, I actually just noticed, speaking of not the best acting, you can see the guy's fingers moving even though he's dead around the little, like, colored handkerchief that he has. You know, because I guess, you know, the actor's still alive. He's just laying there with his arm up, and he's still, you know, oh well, that's silly. But the symbolism is what's important here. He's still, in his death, he raises aloft that banner in an act of final defiance. Even from beyond the grave, he stands in defiance of the fascist horde. It's propaganda. It's very stereotypical, very Whiggish and triumphalist, but in fairness, with this sort of thing and the scene, you know, as we proceed, you know, the gentleman, you know, kissing his dead brother and everything, this is general stuff. This is standard. We still see things like this in modern day films. You think we'd kind of gotten over that, but no. And of course, the final scene, you know, the heroic soldier fending off increasing, you know, fascist hordes coming up the stairway and everything to protect his colleagues as they raise aloft the banner. It's propaganda, but it's nothing worse than what we have nowadays, and nothing worse than what we can see, you know, in American or British films and whatnot. You know, more defiance there. Again, silly, but you get the overall sentiment that, at least looking at this scene, not looking at the rest of the film, just, oh boy, that it's a war film that has a very particular message of struggle and sacrifice and all those sorts of things. It's standard. It's what you would expect. And of course, we have that musical crescendo coming in as the banner is raised aloft over the Reichstag. Men, do note, none of those men have any looted watches on their wrists as they raise that banner. But of course, the one word that our hero, the main character in the story, speaks as he looks aloft at the banner: victory. It's beautiful in a way, isn't it? Victory. Finally, at last, the war is over. And with that, and with the war ending, this is where it gets good. Play. Now wait for it, wait for it. Standard stuff, standard stuff. Now, all right, now look here. You see everyone raising their arms all at once, and everyone, you'll see soon, everyone running towards a building as if the fighting just sort of stops immediately, and everyone turns around. There we are, all in sync and everything. It's wiggish, it's silly, but again, 1950 Soviet film. What do you expect? This is standard. I would forgive them for this sort of thing. Hold on. Oh, don't skip ahead there. Oh, you hear that? Do I hear accordions playing? Those are definitely accordions. That's an interesting, oh no, you might think at first, now that's a rather interesting sort of, sorry, I'm trying to make sure that the wire doesn't hit the microphone there. That may be, you would think to yourself initially, a rather curious choice of a background theme to play after the war. Usually you expect something somber, but surely, the soldiers aren't listening to this. Oh, no. As we see here, oh, look at all the tankists. They come out with their standard issue accordions. Apparently they're very common in the Red Army during this time period. Everyone has an accordion. They're all very good at playing. They form a little band, and the party may begin. They sing and they dance. Men and women in the streets, both. Now, just take a moment to let this scene really sink in. Because from here, it only gets worse, if you can believe it or not. Naturally, of course, the fascist hordes have been defeated. Everyone, let's have a dance party. It's fantastic. Everyone is all smiles and celebratory. Nothing at all like the somber tone that you might expect to genuinely be present after, the worst war, one of at least the worst wars in human history, certainly the worst thing that any of these men have ever experienced. Now, it's very interesting to note that at the end of the First World War, I've read about this an awful lot, the overall sentiment when the peace was announced, when they finally said, guys, an armistice has been signed, the war is over, it wasn't everyone throwing up their hats in the air saying, oh boy, we get to go home. No, it was a somber tone that really overtook the men, sort of like a, the war is over sort of thing, that took over in the trenches along the front lines, all over the front, French, British, Americans, all over the place, when the news had been released. Even on the home front, it was, at least initially, a rather somber tone before the celebrations really began. Because, of course, it's a deeply moving experience. It's a deeply formative experience. The war, for so many of these men, it had been largely all they had known for their adult life, for, the really significant portion of their life, so to say. By 45, it had been waging, at least, in Russia, for like 4 years by that point. And 4 years of the harshest fighting, the harshest total war, a war of extermination, a war which saw so many atrocities on all sides, such a horrific conflict. And when you find out that it was over, you wouldn't be like, oh, you mean no more murder? Yay! No, it's going to be a deeply impactful, moving, slow realization that the way of life you had known for the past 4 years was now over, and who knows what the future would have in store. But nah, let's have a dance party. That's all fine. Let's have a dance party. Now, of course, we look to the Germans coming out from what would only presume to be the Führer bunker, here to surrender, of course. They're beneath the bunker. They hear above, Kamerad, the accordions. I always knew this day would come. And so they rise up out of their underground dwelling to surrender their arms to the conquering heroes, their heads sullen in shame under the escort of the armed guard there, bearing a white flag that they have as they view this as they come out. Imagine, here's a good way to put it. Imagine watching the movie Downfall. If you've not seen Downfall, incredible film, go watch it. But imagine after Downfall, after all of the scenes in that movie, after all the horror, all the terror, all the men shooting themselves and killing their families and whatnot in the Fuhrer bunker because they're so terrified of what's going to happen. All of these men just going absolutely crazy with the realization that their world has just completely broken down. Imagine these guys walking out from underneath the bunker and seeing this. You'll also notice as we move into the scene that not only have the Germans immediately surrendered, but they also immediately, hey, there we go, I got it that time. They also immediately managed to get all of their POWs together. The Russians do corral them all in. There are no aspects of resistance in any portion of the city. The entire German army has surrendered overnight. They all got the word immediately, like, oh, guys, that's the accordions. It's over. Accordions means it's over. And of course, they managed to parade all the POWs through the center of the city for them to throw down all of these banners, where they even got all of these Nazi banners, at such a late stage and everything, so quickly, I couldn't tell you. But they're throwing them into piles. They're throwing all their arms into piles and everything. It's all organized very, very quickly. Now we come to this. Probably the most insulting part about this entire scene. Now, hold on, you may be saying. Who are those people there, singing and dancing through the streets with all of those Red Army soldiers? There seem to be, if we rewind a little bit there, are those civilians? Oh, yes, they are. Are those German civilians? Yeah, they are. It's kind of strange that German civilians would be out celebrating the fall of their nation in the streets like this. And, oh yes, they're German women celebrating in the streets. At the fall of Berlin, I don't think I have to go into all that much detail as to why that particular aspect is highly disturbing. Keep in mind, this film was made 1945, not that long after the actual war. This film came out at a time period when the people who witnessed this occupation, the people who took the city, people who defended it, people who lived there, they were still alive. They could have walked into the theaters and seen this movie, this portrayal of events. And how dramatically does it vary from the reality? In this movie, we see, as the Russians liberate the city of Berlin, German women, virtuous, wholesome German women, dancing in the streets with the soldiers, smiling and celebrating right alongside them. The reality was very, very different for the average German woman on the streets of Berlin in 1945. Indeed, not only Berlin, but all of Eastern Germany, mostly Prussia. The amount that they suffered at the hands of the Red Army. Again, I need not go into detail because I think we're all well aware of what happened in Berlin. And so to show the victims of those particularly heinous atrocities singing and dancing in the streets alongside the soldiers, that is particularly disturbing. Particularly disturbing. And what's more, of course, as we carry on, you will notice that they're not the only ones who are singing and dancing in the streets with all of these soldiers. You will also note individuals in the classic striped pajamas of concentration camp victims. Ah, yes, of course, as we're all well aware, immediately after the city of Berlin was liberated, all of the concentration camps and all their prisoners were also liberated. They were right behind the Red Army. They were right alongside them in the city, immediately liberated, and they were also singing and dancing, just overcome with joy that finally that pesky Holocaust is over. They're just so happy about the whole thing that they're singing and dancing in the streets with the soldiers. If you think that the reaction of incredible joy on the hands of the soldiers with the announcement that the war is finally over, as it's being portrayed here, is a little silly. Imagine reading Night. Imagine watching Schindler's List. Imagine, what's another one? The Devil's Arithmetic. Any of these portrayals of the Holocaust. Imagine after Schindler's List, after Oskar Schindler rides off crying, saying, I could have gotten more, I could have saved more. The Red Army immediately comes into the city, and all the Jews, hey, we're free! Huzzay! I don't know why they'd say huzzay, but you get the idea. They throw their caps in the air, and it's just all partying and celebrating. No, I don't think so. I don't think so, Stalin. I don't think whoever the writers and the directors were for this film, I don't think that's how it went. I really don't think that's how it went. Let's carry on, shall we? As you can tell, I just love this film. Now, of course, we have more scenes of tankists and infantrymen all dancing in the streets. Look at the smile on that guy in the back as he's clapping there. It's extraordinary. The dancing is, of course, really quite impressive, as they just throw all abandon into it. And again, we have these processions of prisoners of war immediately put together, and they're all able to throw these banners. They just have dozens of them lying around, throw them into the pile. And all these men shouting out where they're from, this idea of, we're bringing together the Soviet Union, it's not just the Russians, it's all of us together in this great patriotic struggle, and look, we've all won. And of course, it is very noteworthy that they specifically mention Stalingrad and Leningrad, two of the cities which easily suffered the most during the war. I'm from Moscow, I'm from Baku, of course they have as well eastern provinces, very interesting to note as well. This is the moment, this is sort of like the, I don't know, I can't really think of any examples, but this is like the comparative moment in an American film where you have like the Yankees and the Dixie Boys and the Westerners like all sort of uniting together. It's like, we're all from different parts, we all like live these different lives, but gosh darn it, we're all Americans. Those hokey moments, that's what this is. It's silly. It's not out of place, really. It's not bad, but it's a little silly. The dancing, though, oh my God. It's when you put it all this man right here, nothing negative to say about that guy. He knows what he's about. I respect him. I appreciate him. But again, it's like individual aspects of this are not necessarily all that bad, but it's when you combine all of the elements, that's when it becomes utterly ridiculous. Like, if you want to portray, the Russians celebrating after the war, as I'm sure indeed when victory was announced, that there was some celebrating alongside those solemn moments. I'm sure there was shouting and cheering and everything. But if you want to portray it correctly, there's a film, A Woman in Berlin, I think it's the name of the film. It's a German film, I think. I'll just sort of show a little piece of it right there. If it's not there, that's because it got copyrighted, and I can't show it to you, even if it's only a little clip, which would only in the end encourage people to go see the film, but you get the idea. And it portrays something kind of similar. The city falls, and the soldiers celebrate, but it's a bit more gritty. It's a bit more realistic. It's showing euphoria, but in a way that's, I think, a little bit more appropriate. This is just... it's something else. Absolutely something else. Now, of course, we have generals appearing in the city. They pop in, they say, oh, my congratulations to all of you and everything. I mean, it may be silly, you may think. Now, hold on, it doesn't make any sense for generals, high military staff command guys to all of a sudden, as soon as the victory has been proclaimed, that they're suddenly in the city, congratulating individual foot soldiers on the ground. How do we know that there aren't still mines out there? How do we know that there aren't still German, partisans, behind buildings and everything? How do we know there's not snipers anywhere? This is very sudden for all of a sudden all the marshals and generals to just sort of show up. I mean, if you were to even, in an act of spite, it wouldn't win you the war. But all the same, there are a lot of pretty, crazy, die-hard Nazis out there who'd probably be willing to, take a couple of shots at these guys. It seems a little, soon for them to show up in the city. And also the fact that the city did just fall, 15, 20 minutes ago, unless this party has been lasting for, weeks on end, and we haven't been told that. Something tells me not. It also seems how far away were they from this? How long did it take them to travel to the city? Yeah. But funnily enough, that's not the worst aspect. Along similar lines, that's not the worst example of that, shall we say. So yes, the general riding through the city, and they're being congratulated by all the soldiers and the camp victims and the civilians, all these different people. They're heroes to their men, naturally. This is where it gets... this is where it gets really good. We see a plane up in the sky, flying in towards the city, majestic, like a great bird. As the words are sung, "Glory to Stalin, he is forever true." Yeah. All of the soldiers look up at this plane, and you can see their glances. They're in awe as they run forward. They begin rushing forward in attempts to catch up to this plane, to catch a glimpse of it, to follow it wherever it's going. What could be in that plane? Who could it carry? What precious cargo? Our friend and teacher has confidence in the people. Together with the people, look at how they run, they charge. They all have banners for some reason, all of them. And this slow procession, all of them eager to get some sort of a glimpse of their glorious and great leader. Now, hold on. Okay, now somehow as well, they're all running over onto this airfield, as somehow as well there are international figures. We have Americans, there's Frenchmen, there's Slav, there's maybe like Yugoslavia or something like that over there. I don't know what that last flag was. But all these different international figures. There's these great big portraits of Stalin that have somehow appeared in the middle of the siege of Berlin. You know, these great big monolithic portraits of the man, as if you would experience on, you know, a Victory Day parade or something like that. And they all take off running in this vast, open, you know, airfield, which has absolutely no debris on it whatsoever. I guess they managed to clear away the debris on this particular airfield very, very quickly. And of course, they're all charging after this plane. What wonderment could await for these men? I think you know where this is going. Glory to Stalin, they say. He led the Soviet people fearlessly. All of them jostling for position, including, of course, a camp victim. Got to throw the camp victim in there. Just to remind you guys, we liberated those camps. We don't have any camps of our own. It's that. No, definitely not. And there he is. The man of the hour himself, Stalin, the great dictator, arrives in the city. Probably like half hour after the city fell. You know, Hitler kills himself, Reichstag falls, Stalin shows up. You can just imagine, the conversation. You can imagine, Zhukov rings up Stalin. He says, Comrade Stalin, a glorious victory. Congratulations, sir. We've taken the city. The war is over. Oh, Zhukov, that's fantastic. I'll be there in like 20 minutes. I'm sorry, sir? Yeah, like 20, maybe 30, depends on the traffic. That all right with you? Yeah, duh. Tavarish Commandeer. All right, great, see you then. All right, I've never done a sketch before, so I don't know how to end that. But it's utterly ridiculous. Just he shows up at the end for all of the reasons why it's ridiculous to have a general show up immediately after the siege. Multiply it by 10,000 for someone like Stalin, the guy who is, so extremely paranoid as well. Why he would even want to be within 1,000,000 miles of the city, who knows? But there he is, stepping out of the plane. And note this image right here. Note the way that he is portrayed. Because while there have been disturbing elements to these scenes so far, the German women and the camp victims, things like that, nothing has been quite so disturbing as the way that we are going to now see Stalin portrayed in relation to the people and sort of the power dynamic that is put on display. This scene, this one scene at the end of the film, the entire film, which is riddled with stuff like this, but never more obvious than here. Except maybe for the one scene where a soldier literally says, "Have we ever been fighting without Stalin?" He says, he looks up towards the skies. A soldier asks him, like, "Oh, I hear Comrade Stalin is here. Are we ever without Stalin?" Yeah, quite regularly. Tell that to the guys who were, arrested, who were executed after being captured by the Germans under Order 227. You tell me that Stalin's always with them. Yeah. No, indeed, this is by far the most disturbing element of the entire film. the cult of personality. So take a note here at how Stalin himself is portrayed. In a sea of browns and blacks, men with dirty faces and bad teeth and just men who've been at war, men who are soldiers, sort of the masses, the unwashed masses here, all jostling for position, gazing upon his brilliance. And of course, they managed to get flowers as well. Who knows where they found them? I guess like Eva Braun's garden or something like that. They managed to clip a couple of flowers, just for Stalin. Like, here, I found them just for you, sir. Very strange indeed. But here, note the portrayal of the soldiers, and then look at the portrayal of Stalin. He's the only one in the scene, and it stands out very clearly. He is wearing pure white uniform, which I understand he did, but still. He's wearing that pure white. Even his face, with the amount of makeup and everything that they put on the actor to make him resemble Stalin, gives him this almost pale, sort of ethereal sort of presence. This otherworldly, this divine, almost. This godlike appearance, with how distinctive a character he is in relation to the masses. And it only gets worse from here. The song carries on, the song singing praises to him. He steps down the plain, waving to the people as his generals salute him and all that sort of thing. Now he steps forward, the soldiers, the masses following him after. And again, note that scene. In a sea of like dark green and drab and brown and whatnot, one thing, and of course the red, clearly the red, the one thing that immediately stands out to us is Stalin himself. Always a distinguishing factor in whatever scene he is portrayed in. He is always the thing that our eyes are drawn to. A god among men. Quite a terrible god. Now, of course, he steps forward and he congratulates three of his generals. There's Konev there, there's Rokossovsky, there's all these important people, figure that you would expect to be there, but there's one individual you may notice. Of the three names that we just saw listed, there's one individual who is rather pointedly missing. And that would be Zhukov. Marshal Zhukov, one of the most important guys in like the entirety of the war. Soviet war hero in so many ways, very much respected by the soldiers and the people, all these sorts of things. Konev, I'm sorry, not Konev, Konev is there. Zhukov. Zhukov is very distinctly, very pointedly not present here. Now, well, of course, it wouldn't make any sense for Zhukov to be there. He's probably off somewhere else commanding soldiers. Well, yeah, the same thing for Konev and Rokossovsky, same thing for all those people. It doesn't make sense for any of them to be here. There's no reason, story-wise, there's no reason at all, really, for Zhukov to not be there unless he was explicitly written out of the script or not included in the script to begin with. And that's exactly what happened. 1950. Zhukov has fallen out of favor, shall we say, with Comrade Stalin, because Stalin is a rather paranoid fellow. Zhukov, very popular with the soldiers, and one of those few individuals who was willing on occasion to sort of stand up to the guy. He wasn't in anyone's good graces at that time. By Stalin's order, well, maybe not by Stalin's direct order, but to make sure that Stalin was pleased, maybe let's not include Zhukov in the film. A World War II Eastern Front movie without Zhukov. It's sort of like making a World War II film about the United States. Say a film about how the United States won its own victories in World War II, and all the generals and the important figures, and, at the very end we have, I would say FDR, but he wasn't there by the end. You get the idea. At the end, we have a great big scene with all the generals and everything, but imagine Eisenhower just was never mentioned, or imagine that Patton or MacArthur, or any one of these really big name figures, was just never talked about. Never mentioned, never named, the very end, not present for the victory, just ignored entirely because because he happened to get, like, one of these guys got on the bad side of whatever, you know, whoever was president at the time. They got on bad terms with FDR when he was president, something like that, you know. Imagine for a political reason they just ignore one of those figures entirely, and that's pretty much what's happening here. And again, look at that image of Stalin, how clearly distinctive he is from the rest of the scene. Again, with that white makeup in particular, like, the lighting there is so purposeful. It's gleaming off of him. You can barely even see the guy because of how much light is attracted to him. A god, a golden god among men, as all those portraits are being held up, and the people are all of them collectively singing glory to Stalin. And how loyal he was to Lenin. Oh yeah. Best buddies, those two, Stalin and Lenin. Best buds. Oh dear. Of course, now as well we have internationals flying upwards. We have, I believe, Czechoslovakia there. We have the United States. We have England. We have, well, Britain. We have possibly China with another red flag there. I'm not sure. But, you know, all these other powers, they're running forward. Now, we may be wondering, what are they doing here? They weren't at the fall of Berlin. I mean, maybe they have, like, envoys. Maybe they have advisors. Maybe they have little, you know, but no, we just have a bunch of... Actually, they're all dressed like civilians, and a lot of them are dressed as camp victims. So, you know, the camp victims. The Nazis were, you know, murdering these people en masse, forcing them to work as slave labor for the state war machine. But of course, they let them keep their flags as well, because you have to feel national pride. And of course, they were able to unfurl these banners and run forward to personally greet Stalin. And now, listen to this speech as Stalin speaks to all of his men. Today we are celebrating a great victory over German fascism. How all of those people even managed to hear him, who knows? Because, you know, he's barely even uttering, he's speaking very softly, all things considered, and there are millions, seemingly, of people all around him, just eager to get a glimpse or be in the same, you know, mile radius as the guy, and yet when he utters these silent words, everyone just immediately falls dead silent, dead quiet. Everyone knows Stalin is speaking. No one has to go, hey, shh, you know, nothing. No one, you know, way back in the distance is still cheering or anything like that because they don't know what's going on. No. Everyone dead silent immediately as the word of our Lord comes down to us. We got a lovely profile shot there. Keep that shot in your mind. Again, it's just so obvious. He looks like he's on a piece of currency or a coin or, you know, oh, of course, as he raises his finger there, he says to the men, do not forget the sacrifices you have made. Like a father speaking down to his children, saying, I know you may want to forget, but you must not, for it was very important that we won this war. Oh, gee, yeah, thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy. How many Russians did you throw into prison camps again for surrendering? Yeah. And he gives this completely wiggish, totally inappropriate speech compared with, you know, the actual, you know, things that he said, you know, the things that this man actually believed. And here he is talking about how we need to fight for peace and prosperity and freedom in all the world, giving all of these promises, all of these ideals of what, you know, Red Army soldiers would have been told, you know, after the war is won, then we'll have all of these things, right? Right? We will firmly look to the future. And again, the masses cheering him on. And, oh, incidentally, I should mention, after we get that speech about the future of the Russian people and whatnot, how much of that lived up to be true, I should mention, there's also a romantic subplot in this movie. You know, what would a World War II movie be without a romantic subplot? Am I right, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, no, there's a romantic subplot. It's stupid, it's silly, but, you know, whatever. It provides for this admittedly rather heartfelt moment at the end of the film as the two, two individuals who were separated earlier on in the film, two lovers, are finally reunited after the struggle, after the terrors of war. Finally, they both came through it alive, and they are once more reunited. They see each other, across the field. As a crescendo comes in the choir, she realizes, overwhelmed with emotion, she utters his name, not even believing, wondering, could it truly be you, my sweet? And then, as realization strikes, she cries his name, he, her name. They run forward and embrace together once more through the struggle of war and everything. They made it through. It's a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful, wonderful, emotional scene as once again the two lovers, unite in an embrace and they kiss, the two once more becoming one. And what is being sung? What, as we see this moment of beauty, this moment of triumph, of human spirit and of love between two individuals, the most beautiful thing you could imagine. What do we hear? What is being sent into our minds as we watch this scene? Glory to Stalin. Glory to Stalin. Glory, glory, glory. A song which again brings out religious symbolism and meaning. Glory, glory. It's sadistic. It's twisted. What they do. And of course, Stalin here, you see, he notices, yes, the two, and he has this little smirk on his face. It's strange. And the two go to approach him. What they're doing in this scene, and it's genius the way that they do it. It's, now granted, for a modern audience, not very subtle, but perhaps to the Soviet population of 1950, it would have been less obvious, considering, the propaganda that they had already were living in surrounding by them. But of course, to our perspective, being outside of a system like that, it seems blatantly obvious. Maybe not so to them. But what they're doing here is, it's a classic move as well, very Orwellian. They're taking the emotion of the one thing, of the two lovers being reunited. As I said, possibly the greatest joy that one could imagine. They're taking that joy of a loving relationship between two individuals, two private individuals, their loving relationship, and they are equating it. They are connecting it to. They are sort of co-opting, or what's the word? They are appropriating that emotion for the state. They are taking it and they are relating it directly to love of Stalin himself. They say the only reason why this exists, so to say, is it proceeds. It is, in a way, lesser than the love which we bear for great Stalin. And as if it wasn't obvious enough how they are conflating the emotions in that scene, keep watching. The two lovers approach Stalin as the song is sung, Health and Strength for Many Years. And the woman asks, she strides forward, she gazes up at his glorious body, not looking at him, but you'll notice at the angle here, it almost looks as though she's sort of like looking a little bit above him. Again, and that combined with the perspective here, we see Stalin's back, he's in the foreground looking down on the masses of the people. Again, distinctive, separate, a god among them all. She gazes up towards him and she asks, Comrade Stalin, I'm not gonna say what she says because that would I know it would be a soundbite and a meme, and I'm not gonna give that to you people. I'm not gonna give it to you, but she asks him for a kiss. I won't go into too much detail there, but again, we are conflating the emotion, combining the emotion, making it seem as one of two loving individuals with love of the state. Romantic love, sexual feeling, romantic interest, all of those things that are encased in that moment, all of that redirected towards the state. And if that is not directly out of the book of Orwell of 1984, where indeed literally all joy is perceived as proceeding, descending directly from Big Brother himself. And I don't know what is Orwellian if that's not Orwellian. And it's interesting as well how they portray this scene. of course, for everything you've done for our people. She here, she as an individual, and this couple indeed representing the whole of the Soviet Union, you know, they're being reunited after the war and everything, you know, peace and prosperity, all these different things that are supposed to happen, don't really happen, supposed to happen. She approaches Stalin and she says, can I kiss you? She here representing all of the people, paying their respect and their thanks, their utter loving devotion to the state for being their salvation in this, their moment of need. Stalin, the god upon which again, survival, the fruits of the Russian people now all relies. And it's very noteworthy that we do not see that kiss. We do not see the embrace, we do not see the moment, as we do with Ilyusha and whatever her name was, Natasha. We don't see the moment of their embrace. Rather, when the two are kissing, we get a cut to, I think these are meant to be Italians or Frenchmen or something like that. They cheer, "Long live Stalin!" as she backs away. She does not show her back to him, of course. She doesn't just walk away normally, but again, as a great king, as a great god, she backs away, not daring to show her back, in awe at the brilliance that is this man. Oh, whoopsie. And again, now we see all of the internationals. We see Frenchmen, we see Czechs, we see Italians, we see all these different people, and they're all, in these cases of euphoria, all screaming out, "Long live Stalin," in their respective languages, ending the very last one that we hear, an Englishman, dressed here in, again, those striped pajamas. He throws his hat into the air, and he shouts at the top of his lungs, "Long live Stalin!" Overcome with the emotion, it's seeming to just boil out of him. Euphoria, all devoted to one man, Stalin, even from an Englishman. It's fascinating. It's utterly fascinating. And this is where we end the film. By Stalin saying that we must preserve peace for the sake of the future. Very much having Cold War implications there as well, though I think that we can agree the Russians are hardly a very peaceful people in that time period, or even today. And that is where the movie ends. With this glorious choir, this divine, angelic choir, and ending on Stalin's face, surrounded by his soldiers, and a sea of red banners. That is where the film ends. I think we can press pause now. That's where the movie ends. That is the lingering message, the lingering memory that they want to leave you with as you walk out of the theater. Now again, I'll go back to a more authentic mode here, I think. Imagine being a soldier. Imagine being a soldier in 1950 and being asked to participate in this film. Imagine being a soldier, or indeed a civilian, really anyone at all who lived through the war, and going to see a movie like that and walking out of the theater, all of the experiences that you've had, all of the knowledge of the reality of that conflict just sitting in your mind. And that is the portrayal of the war that you see. What I would have given to have spoken with some of those veterans as they walked out of those theaters, as they walked away from these showings, watching this movie, compared with what they really, truly experienced. Some of them, of course, may have doubted this narrative. They may have said, well, that wasn't what it was at all. And where was Zhukov? And why were the Germans so happy to receive us? And all these different things. And now they may have such feelings, of course. But you dare not mention it. You dare not discuss. You dare not voice any level of criticism. You who experienced the war, you who were there on the ground, you dare not voice a word of complaint or concern towards the way the war was managed, towards the intention of glorious Comrade Stalin, towards the divinity of that man. The orders which were given by him, of course, perhaps being the things which killed your friends, those things by which your family, who were caught behind enemy lines during those massive encircling movements early on in the war, those people who are now being imprisoned as being traitors against the state, those individuals who had lived under Nazi occupation for 2, 3, 4 years, you dare to question any of that, and it's off to the camps with you. Now hold on. We liberated the camps. Didn't you see it in the movie? All of the concentration camp victims, they were so happy. We liberated them. We were the good guys. Well, it doesn't mean we don't have any camps of our own, now does it? And that did happen to many soldiers, those who did dare to question the state line as to what happened in Germany. It was off to the camps with them, as indeed many such individuals, many indeed soldiers, many veterans of the war, would be thrown into the gulags after their struggle for daring to wonder at where the prosperity that they had been promised went. Victory Day. Oh, how far from us it was, like a dwindling ember in a faded fire. Those are the opening words to the song Dane Pobiedi, Victory Day. Now, of course, the song goes on to celebrate the wonder that was Victory Day. But I dare say that those first lines, those first words, are more appropriate to the reality of Victory Day than any other, certainly than the rest of the song is. That Victory Day, immediately after the fall of Berlin, the defeat of Nazi Germany, the war, the Second World War, that which had been a formative experience for so many individuals, the world over, let alone in the Soviet Union, it passed into memory. And from memory, in a way, into historical myth. And the Soviet government, individuals like Stalin, were very keen to capitalize on a twisting of this memory, a shaping, a shifting of this memory into, away from the reality into the state-approved line. It's things like this film. That was how they wanted it to be seen. That is how they wanted the war to be remembered, as a purely victorious, a purely triumphalist celebration of one man and of his efforts, of Stalin, even into the days of de-Stalinization. Even though there aren't all too many hardcore Stalinists, many tankies, as it were, running around in modern-day Russia, even still, the legacy of that corrupting memory, of that corruption of the memory, the legacy of all of this propaganda, at least in my opinion, seems to have really descended down to modern-day Russia to quite a fair extent. And I think that modern-day fashion in which the war is portrayed, that equally disturbed way in which so many Russian citizens continue to remember their soldiers in the Second World War, well, that can be a subject, I think, a video for another day. For now, I think we've gone on quite long enough. So, as always, I should like to offer my thanks to all of you for watching. Of course, to my ever-beneficent supporting classes on Patreon. It is by virtue, of course, of their generosity that I am able to continue making videos like this and doing my work. Thank you very much. And, of course, last but not least, to you, my dear viewer. Thank you very much for watching. And I am, and I shall remain, your most humble and obedient of servants.